The parley line was a portrait of failed diplomacy. A pristine Allied staff car, its chrome bumper catching the weak winter sun, sat idling on the edge of the blast zone. High-ranking brigadiers stood behind it, their boots polished to a mirror shine, watching through binoculars as their third white flag was shredded by a burst of MG-42 fire. Across the ravine, the elite paratroopers of the ridge remained unmoved. Their commander, Colonel von Steiner, stood atop a jagged bunker and spat into the snow. "Send no more of your silk sheet, generals," he bellowed, his voice echoing through the fog. "I will not surrender my honor to men who have never tasted the mud of their own trenches." Just as the Allied command prepared to order a total artillery obliteration, the silence was broken by the rhythmic clatter of a beat-up jeep. It was a filthy vehicle, stripped of its markings and piled high, with rusted spare tires and empty ration cans. It rumbled past the stunned brigadiers, splashing gray slush onto their immaculate trousers. The jeep jerked to a halt at the very edge of the no-man's-land tank traps. An older man in a rumpled, grease-stained field jacket climbed out. He wore a plain, ditted helmet with no stars and carried nothing but a battered canteen. "Sir, you can't be here," a frantic MP shouted, lunging to stop him. "This is a priority parley zone. General Calder Orson is expected at any moment." The man in the muddy jacket didn't slow down. He stepped over the parley line, his eyes fixed on the German bunker. "I know," the man replied, his voice like gravel. "I'm the one who kept him waiting." As he walked toward the enemy rifles, the fog parted, revealing the deep, weary lines of a man who had lived in the dirt for weeks. The brigadiers froze in disbelief. The work party sergeant they had been ignoring for 3 days wasn't a subordinate at all. "My God," one colonel whispered, dropping his binoculars. "That is Orson." Before we continue our story, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe button, and really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The rain in the Ardennes did not fall. It drifted in heavy, frozen sheets that turned the world the color of a bruised lung. Inside the command tent of the 104th Infantry, the air was thick with the scent of wet wool and the blue haze of tobacco smoke. Maps were pinned to folding tables, their acetate covers gleaming under the hiss of a pressurized lantern. General Miller stood over the terrain board, his uniform a crisp, sharp-pressed masterpiece of olive drab. He pointed a silver-tipped swagger stick at the jagged line representing the ridge. "The schedule is fixed," Miller barked. "We move at dawn. If von Steiner won't talk, we let the heavies talk for us." Carpet bombing, then a full frontal assault. In the corner, obscured by the shadow of a supply crate, a man sat on an upturned ammunition box. He was hunched over a canteen cup, steam rising to meet a face that looked like it had been carved from the mud. This was Calder Orson. His field jacket was a disaster, frayed at the cuffs, stained with motor oil, and devoid of the silver stars that usually commanded a room's oxygen. "The ground is too soft for the heavy armor, Miller," Orson said. He didn't stand up. He simply blew on his coffee. "And the cloud ceiling is sitting at 200 feet. Your bombers will be dropping gifts on our own foxholes." Miller stiffened. "The strategy is set by men who understand the big picture." Orson finally looked up, his eyes hollow and piercing. "The big picture is painted in the blood of boys who are shivering in 18 inches of slush. I spent the night in the 327's perimeter. Have you felt the way the damp gets into your marrow?" He set the canteen cup down with a thud. "My men are wet, so I am wet. You want to send a man with a white flag? Send someone who looks like he actually knows what he's asking them to give up." Orson stood up, his joints popping. He didn't look at the map. He looked at the door. "Keep your silk sheets, Miller. I'm going back to the ditch. That's where the truth is." The field hospital was a cavernous tent that smelled of gangrene, ether, and the metallic tang of fresh blood. Orson moved through the aisles of cots, not as a visiting dignitary, but as a shadow among shadows. He walked slowly, his heavy boots making no sound on the blood-slicked canvas floor. He stopped at the cot of a boy no older than 19, whose chest was wrapped in crimson-soaked gauze. Orson sat on the edge of the cot, taking the boy's cold, trembling hand in his own grease-stained palm. "The sleet has stopped," Orson murmured. "The moon is trying to find a hole in the clouds." The boy's breathing slowed, looking at a man who looked just as battered as he was. A few yards away, the tent flaps snapped open, admitting a gust of freezing air and General Miller. His polished leather belt creaked with every step. "The casualty rates are within the projected margins," Miller remarked, his voice carrying clearly over the moans. "Move the stable cases to the rear by midnight." Orson stood up, his face darkening like a thunderhead. He stepped into the light, blocking Miller's path. "They aren't stable cases, Miller. They are men, and they aren't projected margins. They are sons who won't be going home to a dinner table." Miller recoiled. "Orson, your presence here is unorthodox. We have a logistical reality to manage." Orson stepped closer, the smell of cordite and cold earth rolling off him. "Your logistics don't account for the soul, Miller. You want to clear these beds? Then find a way to end this without a frontal charge. Because the next batch of margins will be on your head, not your clipboard." The gray zone between the ridges was a labyrinth of splintered pines and frozen craters. To the German sentries, the figure stumbling through the sleet looked like a lost soul, a medic from the American lines, his Red Cross brassard stained nearly black. This was the recon medic, a ghost that had haunted the German perimeter for 3 nights. Behind the grease paint sat General Orson. He knelt in the slush beside a shell-pocked oak. From this vantage point, he didn't see a formidable fortress. He saw the truth. He saw the way the German soldiers moved, slow, lethargic, their shoulders slumped under the weight of hunger. He watched a machine gun crew struggle to clear a jam, their fingers too numb to work the bolt. Most importantly, he counted the crates. 2 men emerged to haul in supplies. They carried only one small box of ammunition. The German lion wasn't roaring, it was starving. Orson pulled out a small notebook and a stub of pencil. With an practiced hand, he sketched the interlocking fields of fire and the blind spots created by fallen timber, paths his men could use to slip through without firing a shot. A German patrol passed within 20 feet of him. Orson held his breath, pressing his face into the wet wool of his collar. They saw only a weary medic. When the patrol passed, Orson began the long crawl back. His hands were raw, but his mind was on fire. He had seen the empty ammunition tins. He knew the ridge didn't need a carpet of bombs. It needed a witness. As he slipped back through the American wire, a sentry leveled a rifle. "Halt! Who goes there?" Orson looked up. "Just a man looking for a way home, son. And I think I found one." The argument inside the command trailer was louder than the distant mortar fire. "The window is closing, Orson," Miller shouted. "If we don't authorize the carpet bombing now, we lose the initiative." Orson stood by the heater, his damp jacket steaming. "A clean sweep," Orson repeated. "You make it sound like you're clearing a table. There are 3 American platoons pinned in the draw below that ridge. If your heavies miss, and they will, you're burying our own boys under 10 tons of soil. We have to take the ridge." Miller slammed his fist onto the map. "The casualties of those platoons are an acceptable cost." Orson pulled a handful of mud-stained dog tags from his pocket and dropped them onto the map. They clattered with a hollow ring. "I took these off the boys in the hospital today, Miller. Every one of those names had a mother who thinks her son is being led by a man, not a mathematician." Orson leaned over the table, his eyes burning. "You want to order that strike? You'll do it knowing that I'm going back out there. I'll be in the draw with those platoons. If you're going to obliterate them, you're going to have to obliterate me, too. Because I won't sit in this trailer while I'm wearing a clean shirt." He turned toward the door. "I'm giving Von Steiner one last chance to look a real soldier in the eye. If I'm not back by 8 o'clock, tell the pilots to aim for the man in the muddy jacket." The walk across the valley floor was a journey through a frozen graveyard. Orson walked alone. He had left his jeep and the safety of the perimeter a mile behind. He carried no white flag. He walked with his hands empty and visible, his pace steady, as if he were merely a man taking a morning stroll. Silence is a heavy thing on a battlefield. Orson felt the invisible weight of hundreds of German eyes tracking him through telescopic sights. He knew the exact moment he entered the kill zone. His skin pricked, But he did not flinch. He didn't look like a threat. In his frayed jacket, he looked like the spirit of exhaustion. A sudden crack echoed. A single rifle shot that kicked up mud 3 feet to his left. Orson stopped. He didn't dive for cover. He raised his canteen in a slow, grim toast, then took a deliberate swallow. He was gambling on the German sense of curiosity. A general in a polished uniform would have been executed. A bum, walking with the confidence of a king, was a mystery. From the American lines, the soldiers watched in stunned silence. They saw the lone figure, small and gray against the white expanse. "Look at that crazy old bastard," a private whispered. Orson didn't hear him. He was focused on the dark slit of a bunker aperture. He reached the base of the ridge and began to climb, his boots slipping on the icy rock, a solitary shadow ascending into the heart of the enemy's last stand. The summit was a nightmare of frozen mud. As Orson hauled himself over the lip, he stared into the muzzles of 3 MG-42s. A dozen German paratroopers, faces hollowed by starvation, surrounded him. They didn't fire. They looked at the man in the frayed jacket and were paralyzed by the impossibility of him. Colonel von Steiner stepped from the shadow. "You have courage, medic," he said in clipped English. "But we have turned back your generals. We will not be moved by a man who carries bandages." Orson stood his ground. He reached into his pocket with agonizing slowness. The German guards tensed. Orson pulled out a crumpled pack of cigarettes and a single match. He struck it against his thumb and lit one. He took a long drag, then held the pack toward von Steiner. "The sleet last night was a bitch, wasn't it?" Orson asked. "I was in a hole 600 yards down that draw. My boots are still sloshing." Von Steiner Fotze. He looked at the mud caked into Orson's jacket and the 1,000-yard stare that matched his own. "You aren't a medic," von Steiner whispered. "Who are you?" Orson blew a plume of smoke. "I'm a man who's been living in your perimeter for 3 days. I know you've only got half a crate of Mauser rounds left. And I know that in 60 minutes, General Miller is going to turn this ridge into a crater if I don't stop him." He stepped closer. "I'm General Calder Orson, 3rd Army. And I'm not here to talk about your honor. I'm here to tell you that you've fought long enough. Surrender to me, and your men eat tonight. Stay here, and you're just a projected margin on a map." The silence on the ridge was absolute. Von Steiner looked at the American general, then down at the mud-caked boots that had stood in the same trenches as his own men. With a slow motion, von Steiner reversed his pistol and offered the grip. "To surrender to a man who sleeps in the silk of a headquarters is a defeat," he said. "But to surrender to a man who carries the Ardennes on his skin, that is merely the end of a long day." Orson didn't take the gun. He pushed von Steiner's hand down. "Keep it for the ceremony, Colonel. Right now, I need you to get your men moving. We have 48 minutes before the sky falls." The descent was a strange procession. The elite German paratroopers emerged as a gray tide of ghosts, walking alongside the man in the rumpled jacket. At the base of the hill, the staff cars were waiting. General Miller stood with his watch in hand. "Orson," Miller shouted, "what is the meaning of this? We were minutes away from the strike." Orson didn't stop until he was inches from Miller's chest. He looked at the clean, pressed wool of Miller's uniform, then at the hundreds of German and American boys standing together in the mud, alive. He reached up and slowly unpinned the hidden stars from inside his collar and pressed them into Miller's palm. "The ridge is ours, Miller," Orson rasped, and not a single margin was spent to take it. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a foxhole that's starting to feel like home." He climbed into his beat-up Jeep and drove back into the gray mist. The legend of the invisible general was cemented in the frozen mud of that valley. In the weeks that followed, the story of the man in the grease-stained jacket spread through the foxholes like wildfire. These soldiers didn't follow Orson because of the stars. They followed him because they knew he had walked the same miles. Back at the Allied High Command, General Miller never quite forgave Orson for his lack of protocol. But historians would later find Orson's diary, which contained a single, haunting entry. A commander who won't share his soldiers' danger isn't fit to command. He believed that to lead men into the valley of the shadow, a leader had to be willing to walk through the shadow himself, dressed in the same grime. One final photograph remained in the archives. It didn't show the polished general of the victory parades. It captured a man standing alone in a muddy field, his face lined with exhaustion and his uniform indistinguishable from a common infantryman. He was the general who looked like a bum, the commander who spoke the language of the ditch, and the man who saved 1,000 lives by simply being nobody special when it mattered most. They didn't surrender to his rank. They surrendered to the truth on his boots. Sir, the Germans are surrendering to you. Those were the words that defined General Orson's legacy. A reminder that true leadership isn't found in a polished office, but in the trenches with the people you lead. If you believe that a leader's greatest strength is their willingness to share the struggle of their team, then hit that like button and subscribe for more untold stories of the heroes who chose the mud over the silk. What would you have done if you were in that parley line? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.